I just think if I can help one person at a time, in my emails, I use the tagline, let's make a difference. And that's my quest at this.
Good morning. We will get started today on another, what is it, about day 14 or 15 of the Kansas City freeze. So it's still another cold day, but good to be together. Excited to hear today from Janis Dickey. Janis is the author of this book, Financial Prep 101, where she really focuses on teaching financial skills to young adults, which is an interesting career turn when you go back and look at all the things you've done. So I thought it'd be exciting just for you to talk a little bit about your journey and some of the things you have done and what along the way made you realize that folks weren't getting all of the financial education they could use to be successful, and what inspired you to write the book.
Well, thank you for having me, Randy. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk about my book and the online course that accompanies it, and to describe my journey, how I kind of came to write the book and all that went into it. And at the end, share lessons learned and what I'm hoping to offer to individuals that can hopefully benefit by the information that I share. So, I talk about finances, financial planning, financial terms and concepts, and that's a very broad umbrella. There's a lot of topics and nuances to managing money, working with money, and different people approach it different ways. And I used to say when I was a financial advisor, 10 advisors in a room to approach process, and there's not just one way. And when people think about money, the construct of money by itself can elicit different types of emotions and disciplines as well. So what I'd like to do is to kind of go back. Sometimes the story goes full circle and go back to the beginning, because the inspiration for the book, whether it was born out of necessity or circumstance, because I was born and raised in Southern California. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my father worked in real estate, which plays a key into my journey. And he sold starter homes to folks that were, couldn't afford much. And so that was fairly inexpensive homes. So in our household, money was something that was discussed, not how much we had, just how to save and budget. And we didn't have a lot of money. And I'll give a few examples. We didn't have furniture in the living room. By, I guess, age 7 or 8, I had learned to sew. My mom had sewed a lot of our clothes. And so I, in 3rd grade, was wearing my own beautiful creations, maybe not my finest hour, but I sewed some of my school clothes and wore them to school. And so I fairly early on figured out that we had everything we needed. We had food and shelter and loving parents, but maybe not everything that we needed. And as I kind of looked ahead, I figured that I was probably going to have to be the master of my destiny when it came to how I was going to live my life, and specifically from a financial standpoint, because there wasn't going to be money for college coming from my family. So if you have ever seen the movie True Grit, the last one was, I think, Jeff Bridges, and there's a book that goes with it. The little girl, Maddie Ross, she's described as feisty. She shows up and she knows what she wants, and she goes to what the lengths are to get it. And her character may describe me in some aspects, maybe a little or maybe a lot. Determined, opinionated, and the eternal optimist. Failure was not going to be an option for me. So one of the examples I can throw out is when I was 16, I needed braces. And of course, there was no money for braces. So I called up a local orthodontist, made an appointment, walked in, and negotiated a discount and a payment plan for braces for myself, because I knew if I wanted them, I was going to have to make that call. So that's just one example of my determination as I started out. Where that came from, I don't know. But my father was very much very much fiscally responsible. He saved first and then you bought it. And so that was a great guideline for me starting out. When I turned 17, I graduated high school at 17. And before I was 18, I had saved $200. I had a job, and my girlfriend that I'd known since third grade, she and I had rented an apartment, and off I left. I left home to make my financial future. And these little steps, or these big steps along the way, kind of catapulted me to the next step. I actually was working in a store like a Walmart, and I had been promoted to head cashier, which just meant I trained the other cashiers. So at age probably 18, I was already training and teaching. And I asked one of the vendors, which happened to be the Lifesavers vendor, 8 words that changed my life. How do I get a job like yours? And within a month, I was in my new position as a Lifesavers sales representative, calling on stores. And I found that I could call on the stores they had set up for me, and by noon I was done. So I went out and got some more stores, and my quotas, I just kept exceeding them. So they promoted me to a different position. And then I was they promoted me again to a district sales manager, where I trained 6 other salespeople. And in fact, I was only 20 at the time. So I was in Southern California, and in New York, they thought somebody had lost their mind to promote a 20-year-old. So the president of the company came out and rode with me. And then later, the vice president of the company came out and rode with me. And then a few years later, I found myself promoted to New York. So I went from Southern California to New York as National Sales Training Manager. So how does that play into writing? In the training department, there were 3 of us. We actually wrote curriculum, and then for sales and management training for the company, and then went out and traveled the country providing conferences or meetings that presented the material. So there again was another journey from California. I was with Lifesavers for 8.5 years, and then went to the Marriott Corporation as director of sales and marketing. I was with them for 6.5 years. Found myself and moved to Kansas City. Along the way, I had gone back to college and on the side. And by that time, I had my master's in teaching. And I thought I would, when I came to Kansas City, enroll in UMKC, which I did, in a PhD program. And I ended up being an adjunct professor at the college for 4 years while I was completing my program. I thought my next fork in the road would be to teach. But the joke was on me because there was no jobs for teachers when I graduated. So I then decided, by that time I was a single mom with 2 boys, and I decided that I would become a financial advisor. I was good with math and money. I had been doing very well with my meager investments along the way. But I also had been working a second job all these years, and that was I had my real estate license. I also was an appraiser. So today I find myself in my 18th house because I would buy a house, live in it, and then flip it, make some money, go to the next house, um, make improvements and flip it. And that plays into my book as well. When I talk about borrowing and financing, I talk about buying and selling homes and all the terms that go into that. The closing, the interest rates, just a myriad of concepts that when someone buys a house, they might want to have some basic understanding. So as I go through as a financial advisor, I actually now married. John and I have been married. He's in law enforcement for 20 years this year. And he had 4 boys. So now I have 6 boys. And I'm a financial advisor, and I was caring for my mother, and who was in her 80s at the time. And along the way, of course, my boys had the benefit of living with a frugal mom. We would, at one point, my son said, are we poor, Mom? Why are we shopping at Dollar General? I said, because toothpaste is toothpaste. And if we can save a little money here and there, you can see that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, that I took up the gauntlet that my parents had modeled for me. And I didn't finance my college experience. I worked and then paid as I went. The only, no credit card debt, did not believe in any debt of any kind, except for, of course, a car and then the houses that I bought along the way. So Dave Ramsey, I was kind of living by some of his principles way back when. So I found myself as a financial advisor, and I was flipping the houses on the side. And as a financial advisor, and talking to my kids and just hearing all the stories and helping people unravel their financial life, it became quite apparent that the parents didn't know, couldn't help their children financially, or the kids weren't listening if they were giving them some information, and that the school systems maybe had some holes in what they were teaching. I know I didn't get any financial education, and my kids didn't get any when they went through school. They're in their late 30s. My 2 boys are in their late 30s now. So I'm kind of at a crossroads, and I'm helping my kids and now my new family. And at some point, my husband said, you ought to write all this down. You just can't make this stuff up. You can't, these kids need some help. And the stories you're telling me are not, they're not good ones. People are finding themselves in dire straits financially, and they didn't understand. They didn't understand. I have an example, and lots of examples in my book. So I hope to bring real life stories that will help the reader to engage and kind of maybe relate with some of the the topics that they come across. The book is in 5 chapters, and it talks about budgeting and saving, and then borrowing and financing. Investing is chapter 3. Chapter 4 is retirement planning, and chapter 5 is wealth protection. It's a lot of material, a lot of terms that people, I mean, just, and some of them are basic terms. What's the difference between a credit card and a debit card? And what may seem very rudimentary to a lot of people. I had one of my clients, and this story's in there, tell me that his son went away to college. In the first several months, he was, the son was overdrawn constantly, paying $60, $70, $80 in bank fees. And so the client said, you know, son, what's going on here? Took a look, and when the boy had gone to the ATM, he had neglected to subtract that from his balance in his checkbook. I mean, you can't make that up. I mean, and then he had no idea why he was getting these charges. He thought, well, Dad, doesn't that money just come? Don't you just pay that money? He didn't know. And the father, of course, probably had shared information with him along the way, but still, it is a common occurrence that people don't have the foundation. They get into a job and they're asked if they would like to enroll in the 401k, and they really are. They don't know, and HR isn't supposed to help them. It's supposed to get an advisor to help with that topic in a business setting. So what are those just basic terms that we as adults have come across and we navigate our financial life? And that's what I've attempted to put in. I talk about my story, my journey, leaving home at 17 with $200. I talk about my parents, my grandparents. My grandfather had a 3rd grade education, and he was working in the mines. He actually was from Joplin, Missouri area. And when he married my grandmother, and her father said, you know, come and work with me. He was a butcher. Nana's dad was a butcher, and my grandfather was trained as a butcher and worked in the butcher shop. Then he bought the butcher shop. Then they bought the strip mall. Then they bought the apartments across the street from the strip mall. And he did all that with a 3rd grade education. And they did that because they were eminently frugal, and they saved and they budgeted. And, you know, in those days, the credit card, which wasn't introduced probably, I think it's in my book, in the 50s, didn't exist, and people didn't use credit like they use today. One of our sons, and this story is also in the book, when he got married and he needed some furniture and a television, so he went and purchased them, and no interest for 3 years. Sounds good. Well, year 2, when they missed a payment, they gave me a call because they said, hey, we got this bill. We have all this interest that came along. I said, well, did you miss a payment on your furniture payment? And they said, well, we might have. I said, well, that's in the contract. If you miss a payment, then the interest accrues back to the beginning. Typically, read the contract, and now you owe it to the end of the term. And of course, they ended up paying it, but it was something that they hadn't thought of or didn't understand when they signed the contract, when they bought their furniture. So my quest is to offer my online course. I'm offering it free to any corporations that want to offer it as an employee benefit, or any nonprofit. The course itself can be self-directed, And all they need is a code, which I give the organization, I set it up for them. And it's self-directed, and it goes and walks through the books and the topics, and would be an introduction. So maybe down the road, when the young adult encounters their first house purchase, and they say, what is a HUD statement, or don't fill out the contract, don't sign the contract till everything is filled out properly. And to get possibly, I talk all throughout my book, to find a mentor or two, a tax advisor or a financial advisor to help them, because the information's out there. I do think there's a lot of good financial information out there. It's just not getting into the hands of the our youth quickly enough. So anyway, that's my quest. My quest is to get the book out there. It's a culmination of my journey. I started with, at home, and left home, and saving and budgeting and borrowing, financing, investing, and retirement planning. So I've kind of walked that journey. I tried to put in just the basics, because you could spend, reams of books on just investing alone. And to help our people, and to help organizations who are working with youth or young adults, to offer this to them and to mentor them.
Harry, he's not on here, but Harry has that little drill of, what are the 7 words that describe you? And just listening to that story and that journey, I think of hard work, determination, perseverance. So those pretty much sum up the Janis story. I mean, you did a lot of things the hard way, but you just didn't give up.
No, as I said at the beginning, failure was never an option. And I am such an internal optimist. I believe if you work hard and you reach out and ask the right questions. When I was applying for my PhD, they don't tell you, but one of the hardest pieces of getting your PhD is you have to find faculty that will be on your committee. And the committee, there's only certain people that are qualified to be on committees. And then they only can take on so many people. And then on top of that, they have to be interested in what your topic is. My topic was teaching methodologies in the classroom. So how do people learn? And that also played into my book, because I know that activities and stories, if you present material, people are 63% more likely to remember what you've talked about if you have that story attached to it. So one of the people that interviewed me to be on my committee was a gentleman in the Block School. My dissertation is in the School of Education in the School of Business. So I met with this gentleman, and right off the bat, the professor says, I can't take on anybody else, but I'll listen to what you're doing. And then at the end, I'll give you a couple of other faculty members that you should approach. So I thought that, okay, he was upfront with me, that's fair. So we spent about probably 30, 40 minutes together. He had given me 2 people to talk to. And then he asked the fateful question, is there anything else I can do for you? And this is give you a great insight into my personality. I said, well, I just have one more question. Wouldn't you reconsider being on my committee? And of course, the gentleman goes, okay. I was like, okay, here we go. One less thing I've got to do. And he was terrific. But it was always my perspective that if you don't ask the question, if you don't find the right individual, then you're really doing yourself a disservice. And when it came to writing the book, my husband really, said, why don't you write this down? He was really talking about for our kids. And I just took it and ran with it. And I've met with such great acceptance. It's really wonderful. I just think if I can help one person at a time, in my emails, I use the tagline, let's make a difference. And that's my quest. At this point, I've been blessed enough. I was an advisor, I guess, for 18 plus years. So came across and I felt like I would tell everybody that was my client or just that I was trying to help, that really my calling in life was a teacher trainer. And the more that they knew about how they were investing, the more they understood, then the better the experience is going to be. And in my book, I have some research, and the book is research based. There's over 500 URLs. When you write your dissertation, everything you write has to be confirmed, or there has to be a source. So that's how I wrote the book. Just who I am. It's not just me talking. Everything is kind of sourced from somewhere else. But so anyway, I just think that the book can be used as a resource. So maybe somebody isn't buying a house today, but in 5 years they say, I think I heard about some things I needed to look at. When I bought my house, as my husband used to say, you might as well sit down. She's going to read every word of the contract, because guess what? There are mistakes in the contract, and guess who usually has to pay for those mistakes? But if you don't look, you don't ask, I guess you never know that you overpaid. I don't know. So sorry.
You're not old enough, but so much of the way you live and describe living sounds like folks I've talked to that came out of the Depression. I imagine there must have been some tremendous impact from your grandparents to your parents, and some of that mindset of frugality, and there are a lot of great stories that come out of those minds of Southeast Kansas, Southwest Missouri, people who grew up with that tough, rugged, spendthrift mindset. Mickey Mantle came out of there. You can go to places like Chicken Annie's in Pittsburgh, if you've ever been there, and that's just a great story of resilience out of those minds. There are cool stories. Do you think you got a lot of that as a kid?
I did. Well, my mom once said that there was a potluck lunch at the church. And I said, are we going to go? I was probably 7, 8, 9 years old. And she said, no. And I said, well, okay, why not? She said, because we can't afford to take a tuna casserole to the church. We can't afford it. And she did we had those green stamps that she had books, and we had to put them in the books, and they gave you discounts. We only had one car, so she would catch a ride with the lady across the street once a week to go to the store, and her shopping list for her food was crafted around whatever the discount sales were, coupons that she had clipped. She was a coupon clipper, and she would figure out how much money she saved by using the coupons, and she put it in a shoebox. And then once a year, she and my dad would go someplace for a couple of days. And as a kid, we didn't eat out. We didn't go on vacations. But you know what? I didn't know any different. I was fine with it. I didn't care we didn't have furniture in the living room. I wasn't going in there anyway. So, and one television, which my dad obviously had. We didn't have remotes. We were the remote. He got up and turned the channel for him. Anyway, but you are right, Randy. And I carried that on to my children. and my two boys. So they grew up with it. They have the lessons learned, and it's paid off for them. They are fiscally responsible. So, you look and you say there's a couple of gifts that you can give to your children, and there's many. And being financially responsible, I've seen it time and time again, how people have gotten into trouble with debt or another situation, and it's emotional. It carries over to other parts of their lives and causes stress, and that has long-term effects. So you want to keep a balance. You're fiscally responsible. It's one less thing you got to worry about.
Let's go to Michelle.
Janis, thanks so much for sharing your story. I love hearing this. It makes me think of some things in my childhood. I grew up, my mom and dad were not good with money, really. I mean, they were okay, but I kind of grew up feeling like they really weren't, and I needed to learn more. So I remember being in my 20s, reading Susie Orman books.
There you go.
Get myself up.
Mm-hmm.
So I really always wanted to do better for my kids and educating them. So I'm just curious some of the tips that you may have on what age do you start educating kids on saving? I mean, do you have any tips on kind of like how to take those steps or what's most important? So, kids can be better going off as they go out on their own.
Oh, absolutely. I guess that, some of the lessons learned is the earlier you start, the better off you can be, because you have less opportunity to make some of those mistakes. Like one of my clients who ran an international business, I mentioned I had my mortgage origination license. He said along the way, Janis, let's refinance my house. I said, okay, sure. We're asking questions, and the financial institution that I was working with said, we won't take them. I said, what do you mean? The man has a company. I mean, he owns a company. He has, I know he has money. And it came to be that he had late paid his mortgage. And that's it. You late pay your mortgage, you're not going to be getting a great loan to start with, let alone some places won't take you. So starting as early as you can. You asked me what age? Probably by age 14, I was, my dad had me on a budget. I was saving for a car. And then of course I had some money and I got those braces. I was working at that particular time. But as we were on a Zoom call with one of John's nephews, and he's 17, and his mom, they have my book, of course, and his mom said, I have asked him to put half his paycheck in a savings account, and that's what he does. I have a story in my book about friends who gave their kids in high school allowance. And with their allowance, they had to pay for their car insurance, their cell phone, and any other extras that they wanted. And I don't know if there was something else. So to have and to model what you're trying to show your kids or tell your kids to do. My parents never shared how much my dad made. I did not know what they brought home, what things cost. That was never shared with us. So as a parent and as a single parent, my kids knew, and this is what we pay for our mortgage. This is what we pay for food. This is what this costs. And they actually didn't get cell phones until they started driving at age 16, which I know is like, oh, mean mom. But at the time, it wasn't as big a deal. I mean, kids weren't getting them until maybe 14 or 15. But I figured that they didn't need them. I mean, I knew where they were. I was, I was kind of there watching them. But so I don't think there's any particular age. Money and math are good skills to go together, and you can, demonstrate that, play games. There's some great programs now. I think it's called Money Mammals or Money Monkeys for even younger kids on the internet. There's so many sources. I have a couple of pages in the back of my book that offer websites to go to for, just to enhance education. Education is power, and that helps. Other lessons learned are it's never too late. That's the flip side. I had a client, and he was 55, had gone through a divorce, and he did not manage the money for his family. And before they got divorced, there was credit card debt that he didn't keep track of what was happening. It just happened to be a male. It could be either way. And so when he got divorced, he could not. He told me he bought a house, and his mortgage was percent. The interest was over 9% because his credit was horrible. Well, 10 years later, his credit's over 800. He got his credit repaired. He has a new house. His business is thriving. So it's never too late he's 65 now. He's still working. So it's never too late, but the earlier you start. And then that also points out, pay attention. The little things, the little details do matter. They absolutely matter.
Thank you. Those are good tips.
I think Clark has an unusual question.
Okay.
Sure. Does anyone go to the grocery store and then they buy tomatoes or any other fruit, pull off the stems? Because my father-in-law taught me that you don't want to buy those stems because you're not going to eat them.
And they weigh.
He's like, I'm not buying those stems. And he grew up in the Depression. So
there you go. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
I still do it now. I'm going to buy 4 tomatoes. I'm going to take all the stems off, put the tomatoes in the bag, and then I don't know how much they weigh, but
I don't know.
It's not nothing.
I really did not see that coming, Clark. I did not know where you were going with that question.
I'll be telling that to other people. I'll use that story, Clark.
I don't think it makes a big difference, but I just do it because I think of him when I go to the grocery store from that perspective. So,
it took me 29 years to get my PhD, from the time I started to the time I actually got it. But I did not go into any debt to do it. Now, on the flip side, one of my boys is a lawyer. And of course, he did get school loans. When he graduated with his loans, he had $94,000 in loans. And we sat down and put together a spending schedule where he would pay back double. And believe me, he ate beans for probably 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And people used to ask me if he was dating. I go, dating? He can't afford to date. And he'd say, no, Mom, I'm not dating. I'm eating beans. Yeah. But it's now, oh my gosh, he's 36 now. He's a partner in a law firm, a junior partner, and he has a house, and he just got married. He waited for years to get married. And so it can work out. But he was fiscally responsible. He paid everything back and did it the hard way. So you can, if you are going to borrow, I mean, you have to borrow for some things. I don't think saving, I ran into somebody who said that their niece and nephew were trying to save to pay cash for their house. So, whoa, okay, that's kind of tough, but more power to them if that's what they want to do. Don't discourage it, but maybe waiting 10 years or more. I don't know. Unless they made a lot of money, maybe they did.
Right. Yeah.
You know, Chris has on here that you're paying $5 a pound for the water they spray on the veg. You guys are enlightening me to all of the secret margin of the grocery business. I never thought of these things.
Oh yeah, the stories you hear. You know, my husband's been in law enforcement for 40 years, and the stories he tells you can't make up, and I tell him the same thing. The stories that people have told me about what has happened to them or someone they knew, and believe they're not all bad. I mean, they're not all bad. Have been very successful saving and budgeting and making good investment, good sound choices. But there are, in my book, I have another story about, I did a lot of sitting in conference rooms or lunch rooms during my financial planning. I would sit with teachers or just employees for a 401k. A gentleman sat next to me and he said, I was saving for a house. I saved $50,000. And he goes, one of my workmates said that he had an investor and he was a day trader. I said, ew, a day trader? Okay. I never make comments about what anybody else is doing with their, that's not my job. I will give counsel, but I'm not going to disparage somebody else's choice. So anyway, it turned out that the gentleman ended up giving his $50,000 to this day trader, which is very speculative, very aggressive way to go. And he said it went great for the first couple months. He was up to 80,000, and then poof, the guy left, lost it and left town. So you hear stories like that and it makes your heart hurt. But on the flip side, there's a lot of stories that were very positive, and I try and focus on that. And when I work with kids, show them, when I worked with teachers, I would show them if they put X amount away, that how much of that would be because it was pre-tax, they put it in a traditional IRA, how much difference it really would look like on their paycheck, because they're paying taxes if they don't put it away. And it was great because people would say, oh, well, I could put $50 away. It only looks like $10 less on my check or whatever it was. And I said, and your account over here is growing. So it was a lot of fun. I had a very satisfying career working with people and their money and helping them out. And I didn't just do investments. I would talk to them about houses and other, you know, their kids, their college planning and so forth. It was a lot of fun. And I always felt like I was just a teacher.
Let's go to Chantel.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Janis, if you're familiar with the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Sure.
Okay. It's pretty well known. And I guess what I'm interested in is, how have you seen different money backgrounds sort of play out in relationships? For example, I have a friend who's dating someone who comes from a very low income family, below the poverty line. Anytime he gets money saved up, it's almost expected that he gives it to other members of the family who are struggling, because there's this view that money is a resource and you maybe have it or don't, and your brother needs help with something, so you just give the money that you just saved away. And my friend comes from a middle class family, so she views money as security. And so she's, you know, she owns a house, she has savings, and it's a struggle because they don't have the same view and the same context for money. So what are your thoughts about those kinds of dynamics that get created when our relationships with money are different?
It can be really tough. And specifically in marriages where one person thinks they save and then they want to go spend or buy it on, buy something, where the other person is, holding on to it. And it is, money is a secure, one of the security pillars that in our society today. So it can be quite challenging. I guess my counsel would be that they probably need a professional counselor, because money can definitely drive a wedge. And if you have different perspectives, it was very important to me. My husband was floored. I had been dating John a couple of months, maybe 3 months. And I just turned to him one day and I said, "So how much debt do you have?" And he said, "Well, I owe $2,000 on my truck." I go, "That's it? No credit card debt? What's your credit score?" So he didn't say anything to me at the time, but later on, before we were engaged, he said, "I cannot believe you asked me that question. No one has asked me that question. Why did you need to know that?" I said, "Because it's important to me. I couldn't live with somebody that was not fiscally responsible. I know that would be a problem for me, and it would be my problem. I will own that." And so he was very similar. In fact, one of my rules when we got married was to keep every receipt you could, and I throw them in a box. And I got all these boxes with different years on them. He thought I was insane. He said, "What do we need those receipts for?" Well, they come in handy when you have a warranty, or you want to return something, or you just want to add things up for your taxes. So now, it's 20 years. He's had to agree and fall in line. We compromised, but that isn't one of the areas that I compromised on. So yeah, it can be really tough. And it sounds like that's kind of a culture scenario. So they might want to really get some, before John and I got married, we got married at the Christian Country Club Christian Church right there on Ward Parkway. They had a 10-week course that we had to take, and we had to take a test. And some of those type of questions were on the test, and we lined up pretty well. So we were okay, but they said 10 to 15% of the people that took the test postponed their marriage for a while. So they're just saying, counselor. Anyway, anybody else?
So what comes next? What do you do? Where do you take the book next, and how do you continue to spread this message?
Okay, well, I have been having some great success. I've been talking with a lot of nonprofits that work with teens and young adults, and offering that I would give them a code and they can give it to their clients, or whomever, the people that they're working with, to try and help them. And they can go online and just take the online course. The book's in an ebook too, at Barnes and Noble. So if they wanted, a lot of the younger kids just want to go online and do everything online, they could do that as well. And then anybody that's interested in offering it as an employee benefit, possibly, or homeschoolers, or any educators. I've got a lot of feelers out, and the word's starting to spread. And that's all I'm trying to do, is just to get out the information at this point. I'm welcome. I'm up for ideas.
Well, it's not just young adults. I've met a lot of not so young adults that still don't understand that if you charge $1,000 on your credit card each month and pay the $25 minimum payment, the balance never goes down.
There's a story in my book, and the pastor said from the pulpit that a young lady graduated from college, and she got an office job, and she needed some office attire. So she went out and spent $2,500 on clothes. Reasonable, but that she just paid the minimum payment. And he said, how many years, this is his story, not mine, but how many years would it take to pay off the credit card? So I leaned over to my husband and I said, she never pays it off. And then the pastor said, 83 years. And I thought, 83 years, and she's probably at least 20 or 21. She never paid it off. So yes, and people don't understand that minimum payments just snowballing. You're exactly right, Randy.
Well, it's important work you're doing. I know there's others on here that are they're doing similar things, and there's another variation of that too, just around teaching people entrepreneurship and how to start and run a business. Doing a little plug for Mary Ricketts. She was on a program I listened to yesterday with SBA and their SCORE program, and every message from all of the speakers was around understanding your balance sheet, understanding cash flow, all the things that most people who have a skill and start a business don't know those things, you know. And so there is another element of education, just to what are the things you need to know to go do what you're passionate about. It's cool to see people like Mary and others like that teaching that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of synergy that can be shared in this area. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome to spend time with you. Enjoyed hearing the story. It's very inspiring and awesome to see all that you've done. Not the easy way, a lot of it the hard way, but you just kept pushing through.
What was it? E.F. Hutton said something about money. We do it the old-fashioned way. We earn it. So there you go.
That's right. Well, thanks, everyone. It was great to be together. Stay warm. We'll defrost this weekend, and we'll start to get back to normal, and hopefully see all of you again next week.
See you next week. Thank
Thank
you.
All right.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.